ADHD coach in private practice, but here's a little bit of my story. I spent a lot of time in what we call a post high school yeshiva. I studied to become a rabbi, and I took that into teaching. So I was teaching in high school, having a blast, and looking for a little bit of a side hustle. So what happened was I was pursuing or considering different areas of mental health. I decided to go the coaching route, and from there I went into ADHD coaching. ADHD coaching was the thing I saw around both in my professional life and in my personal life. So the idea was very exciting to me. And so about 7 years later, here I am, an ADHD coach in private practice. A couple years ago, I started my podcast, the ADHD Heroes podcast. So I have my podcast and I have a blog called ADHD and Beyond, and that's what I do. Welcome to the Test Kitchen podcast.
All right, Samuel. I'm glad to have you on. Nice to see you again. That's actually a wild journey. I don't think I've seen that combination before of being a teacher, a rabbi, and an ADHD coach. But before we get to that, I have a round of icebreaker questions. So just rapid fire. The first question is, if someone said, "I'll give you $100 million to sing a song word for word," what song would it be?
Oh my. Uh, Sing a song, word for word. Let's go with the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh,
Proud to
okay.
be an American. Yeah.
All right. Next one. If your house was on fire, everyone is safe. Um, what are you running back in to get if there's just one item?
One item. Um, it would have to be one of my religious articles. We have something we put on every day. In English, they're called phylacteries.
Hmm.
And it's a very meaningful part of my daily routine and a very significant item. So I think we'd start there.
Okay. All right. What is something that most people don't know about you that you've wanted them to know?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think I want people to know about me. I guess in those moments that I may come off as a little austere, um, in my position as rabbi and teacher, um, they should know I'm not so scary. We can have a good time. I like to smile.
You're just a human, just like the rest of us. You like to
Yeah,
have fun too.
exactly.
Okay, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who is sitting at the table?
Whoa, that is a good question. Anyone in the world? I think we'll take Russell Barkley.
Okay, Russell Barkley.
Yeah.
I actually don't know who that is, but I don't know who a lot of people are. So,
Russell Barkley is one of the um, he's a researcher on the subject of ADHD. He's recently retired, but he's very
mm,
accomplished in this field. So it could be a lot of fun to pick his brain.
okay, yeah, I will have to look him up. I feel like I should know who he is because I have ADHD.
No pressure.
No pressure. All right. So, just jumping into it, what made you decide to become an ADHD coach? Because if I remember correctly, you told me that you don't have ADHD, and most of the coaches that I've met do have it. So,
Yeah.
what was that? What was the deciding factor?
Yeah, correct. Interestingly, when I was looking into different training programs, I felt like a little bit of an outlier that I'm the only one who doesn't have ADHD. And I was talking to somebody, Laurie Dupar, who has a training program, and I said, I feel like a little bit of an outsider here. She said, nah, it's not so bad. You don't have to feel so bad. And it turned out I found someone else who was in a very similar position, and we discussed it on my podcast, Jody Sleeper Triplet. Um, but the way I found it was I was looking to do something in the field of mental health. I found coaching, um, and I was looking for a specialty within coaching. Um, and somebody brought it up. Someone who is in the field of mental health brought up that there is such thing as ADHD coaching,
Hmm.
and my interest was immediately piqued because I see it around in some places very close to home. Meaning, I have family members who have it. Um, I grew up, 80s and 90s when people had it, but they didn't diagnose it. They had other things to call it, less flattering. And I always gravitated toward that sort of personality. So when I heard that there's a way to help people who are struggling with that challenge, it hit home meaningfully, and I definitely see it in my classroom. So, number one, to be able to help these guys, um, and number two, just to understand them better.
I see. Yeah, speaking of that, you said you see it a lot in your classroom. I can imagine. Um, do you coach the kids in your classroom as well, or do you only focus on coaching adults with ADHD?
So I mostly coach adults, the occasional teenager. And the reason why is because for coaching to be effective, someone needs to be able to tell me what's difficult for them and what they need to be able to work on. And not every teenager is ready to do that, which is okay. I used to be a teenager also,
Right.
so that's fine. But they're not ready just yet most of the time. But the fact that I know what I know is very helpful in my classroom. So, for example, I have a rule I like to tell my clients, which is take the break before the break takes you. So I tell my students who need it the very same thing. And sometimes they'll say, "Can I take a break before the break takes me?" And sometimes that's a few minutes after the break already took them and like half the class. But that's okay. Because thanks to the training, I understand what I'm looking at. So it doesn't get me thrown off. I mean, it's a challenge to running a classroom, but I'm able to maintain my cool.
I see. Yeah, I might have to take that advice because I do not take it right now. As somebody with ADHD, I tend to either ignore something completely or get so hyper focused on it that I will just sit in the chair and just do whatever it is that I'm doing for hours and hours and hours. And I realize I haven't eaten, I haven't gone to the bathroom or anything. The blinds are still open and it's midnight. And then at that point, the break has definitely taken me.
And you go to the point where you can't. You're tired, overworked, drained because you've gone that far. One of the big challenges with knowing when to take that break is even if you know it on paper, having something that wakes you up to knowing that it's time for that break can be a big challenge, especially if you're on hyperfocus. If you're not on hyperfocus, you're you're you might just not be watching the time or might not be aware of the time, and if you're in hyperfocus, it's that much harder. The sort of things I recommend, sometimes even just setting an alarm to let the time go. That can be a big one. Sometimes setting things up in a way that things come to a natural end. So, for example, if there's a task that takes X amount of time, so you do that task and then you have your break built in. Um, but it can really vary from person to person. But those are sort of the standard approaches because that could be a real issue, losing track of the time.
I see. Is there like a recommended time for taking the break, or does it just depend on what you're doing? Because I know like there's the Pomodoro that says 25-minute increments, and people like Jim Quick say you have to take like you can do like 60 minutes max of deep work. But have you noticed any like specific, I guess, cycles of work? I don't know what to call it.
Right. So what I try to do is I try to ask each client what they think, and I find that people really have insight into how much time they have in the tank, and they will surprise me in either direction. Some people will be like, "I got 10 minutes, that's it," and some people are like, "No, I got half an hour." And I actually once had a fantastic story. One of my jobs in teaching is that there's like a study hall, and kids come over to ask questions. They'll study together with me. It's less classroom ish. And one of the kids comes over and he says, "Okay, let's study together a bit." He said, "But I'm having a rough day, so just hang in there." And I said to him, "How much time do you have in the tank?" And he said, "Half an hour." So he studied for half an hour. He's on all cylinders. He's good to go. And neither of us is watching the clock. At a certain point, he says, "Okay, I'm out of gas." We look up at the clock. It's exactly half an hour.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So people really have insight.
Right. So it's kind of just do what you feel. I guess I can see that when I go for a run. Some days I can run 6 miles, some days three, some days even more than that. But I kind of know like the days. So like, okay, today I got about 6 miles in me, and then generally that's where I start to hit my point. So I can see that. What's the biggest misconception that people without ADHD have about people who do have it?
Oh, okay. Can I give you two?
You can give me as many as you have.
Okay, my favorite one, meaning the one that comes up most frequently, is people ask, how could it be that my spouse, child, whatever, has an attention deficit if they can play video games for hours and hours and hours on end, or they can read this book for hours and hours and hours on end? I can't even get them out. So, how could they have an attention deficit?
Hmm.
The answer is that ADHD is not, well, the term attention deficit is used, and that is the title. It's not really so precise. What it really is not a deficit of attention, it's not a lack of attention, it's an impairment of how to control the attention. In other words, attention is there, but it doesn't go where you ask it to go. It's like the famous 500-pound gorilla that goes where it wants to go. So sometimes where it wants to go is the most annoying or obnoxious thing in the room, like the proverbial fly buzzing around the room or the ice cream truck outside. Sometimes it's there. Sometimes it's the thing that's the most interesting, the shiniest toy, they like to say. Whatever it is, that can hijack the attention. And that's why the way a lot of people with ADHD get through graduate school is by cramming the night before. Because all of a sudden, that adrenaline rush um, the night before finals, that hijacks their attention, and then they can focus like nobody else can. That's hyper focus. That's probably the most meaningful um, misconception out there.
Hmm.
Um, the second is just not understanding the whole thing. People um, figure if you just try harder, um, or if they would, I don't know, do things that are helpful for their brain, like, spend less time on their phone, eat less sugar. All those things are helpful, but they're not making the ADHD go away. ADHD is neurodevelopmental; it's there. So those are probably my biggest two.
Okay. I kind of have two questions actually from that. Um, I guess the first question is dang, it just slipped my mind. I have so many questions in my head. I'll go with the other one. So you said that is not actually helping, like try harder. So how would someone actually mitigate it? Like what do you do? Like if trying harder is not the answer, then what is the answer?
Well, good. The answer is try differently or try smarter, as they say. Meaning, if you understand how your brain works, what are the ad- um, advantages it has, and what are the challenges it has, and work with your brain um, rather than trying to do what works for everybody else and pushing harder. Do what's going to work for your own brain. So that begins with understanding how the ADHD brain works. What the inherent challenges are, and then what your own personal strengths are, and leveraging the strengths to compensate for the challenges, and allowing yourself the latitude you need to address the challenges that you have. That's okay. But just pushing the same way everybody else is, that's not going to do it. Heck, that is more likely to lead to nothing or burnout.
I see. So what could be some examples of trying differently, or I guess what would that look like?
Right. Um, so a common one for me, for my clients, is um, the ADHD brain is famous for procrastination. But what is less well known is that ADHD flavored procrastination has its own source. Meaning, when we speak of procrastination, there's almost like a judgment to it, like they don't want to do this because it's hard, it's not fun, whatever. So they're pushing it off because they don't want to, like a little kid who doesn't want to go to bed. Um, it's more of a comes off as a bit of a judgment. What's really happening is this: um, the ADHD brain procrastinates when a task is too long, too boring, or too unclear, too ambiguous. What happens is the ADHD brain has a fear of boredom, and these long tasks are also, um, it dreads these long tasks, and that's one category of things. And the other category of things is when something is too ambiguous. When something is too ambiguous, so it is unclear. So the brain sees it can even be on a to-do list or something. The brain sees this thing that means basically nothing. So what I like to say is, if you look on your task list and you see due taxes, what that really means is run for your life. So what the example of trying differently would be understanding this is what's going on in the brain. This is why it's so difficult. And now you would need to learn how to operate within your brain strengths and abilities. How can I get this done? So, for example, with taxes, let's say, so do taxes is not going to help, but one task could be find certain documents. That's one task. Find these documents.
Hmm.
It could be a big pain in the neck. You got to search through these emails, or maybe you have to print it out, and maybe you need to even break it down more. Break it down to search emails for these documents. Then a separate task will be email the accountant. A separate task will be follow up with the accountant, call the accountant. But each step has to be small enough that it's going to actually happen. Because even smaller tasks that aren't small enough that they're going to happen are going to provide the same problem. So that's working with your brain to understand why it's difficult and what you can do about it. So as opposed to saying try harder, which means I'm in this chair, I see this task list, I'm not budging till I get out of here. I'm not budging till I get out of this task list, get everything done. Um, so it can happen, but it'll take hours and hours and hours, and you'll feel incredibly drained, and it won't be efficient. It'll take
Hmm.
forever. So that will be one example. Another example with the task that is too boring. So again, you might want to break it down. You might want to identify which is the boring part, so you can isolate that on its own. And for that boring part, you can reward yourself maybe because that brain is looking for that dopamine hit. You need to identify a reward that's going to work for you, meaning it's got to be something that's not bad for you. And if you're going to reward yourself when you're supposed to be working with taking 2 hours off to watch a movie, that's
Hmm.
lovely, but it's not so practical. If you're going to reward yourself with chocolate, but you have a problem with sugar, that's not going to work. So it's got to be something that works. But you might want to isolate that boring part and knock off the other parts first. So there are some examples of things that you can do that works, with your brain.
Right, right. Yeah, I was watching a TikTok the other day, and it was the I think it was called the inside of the inside of the mind of someone inside the mind of a procrastinator. And he, I don't know if you've seen it, but he defined like this is what a regular person's brain looks like, and it was like a captain driving a ship, and then it said, "Here's the inside of a mind of a procrastinator," and it showed the captain, but like behind the wheel was actually like a wild monkey, and it was like the
That's funny.
whenever there's like danger, and so the only time that the ship will do something is when there's like an extreme like panic. And he was describing like he wrote this 90-page dissertation. He had all semester to do it, and he figured that he would just do a little bit, but he actually started working on it 3 days before, and he could only start 3 days before because that was when the adrenaline was high enough for him to want to get up and do something about it.
Right. That sounds like. Does he describe himself as having ADHD?
He did
Or
not. He it was themed around procrastination, but I'm sure sounds like one of us.
yeah, that last minute adrenaline can often be key. I mean,
Is
it's
there a
something.
way? Is there a way to induce that, or because I know you mentioned like breaking it down or giving yourself a reward? Is there any sort of hack to just trick your brain to say, okay, it's go time, even when it's not, or like tricking yourself? Because I've tried to say that the deadline is tomorrow. Sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Right. Do you remember the times that it worked? Like, what was there anything unique about those?
If I gamified it, or if I just set a challenge to myself, it will work. The few times that it worked really well is when I had a friend and we were playing this productivity game and we would challenge each other, and like the loser was just the loser.
Okay,
Those times
exactly.
it actually worked.
Yeah. So that's what it is. Meaning, you can't fool your brain, but you can get the juices flowing in some other external way. So gamifying is great. Challenge, competition, all those are great ways to get the brain going. Create that need for the adrenaline, that adrenaline rush. Exactly what you said is exactly what I would say.
Okay. Is there anything that works for both the ADHD brain and the non-ADHD brain? Because I get a lot of people who come to me now that I post more about ADHD and I'm building an ADHD app. People come to me and they say, the way that you describe it, I think I have it. And there have been a flood of people who just come and I'm pretty sure they don't have it, but they say like this sounds very similar. Doesn't everyone have this? So I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Right. So tools that work for the ADHD brain help everybody. So the the strategies I learned for coaching, I definitely use for myself, and they definitely help. So they'll help for anybody, regardless of what the problem is, and regardless of what their challenge is. Breaking things down to be more manageable, using your strengths to leverage for where there are challenges, those will help anybody. Um, as far as people diagnosing themselves, so I think that's probably points us to another common question people have with ADHD, which is, doesn't everyone have trouble concentrating sometimes? And the answer is, of course they do. But for something to be diagnosable, it has to be severe, reach a level of severity that is not the norm, and it has to be disruptive to the point where we'll use the term disorder. It's not like such a fun word, but that's where it qualifies for that term. So someone who's having trouble concentrating, like everyone sometimes has trouble concentrating, will benefit from the same strategies that someone who chronically has trouble concentrating will benefit from. Yes, that is true.
Okay, interesting. So is there so you speaking of that, you don't have ADHD. Are there times where you just look at somebody's brain and you kind of don't understand like why like what is the disconnect here? Do you ever have those moments?
That's a great question. Um, because of my training, I know what I'm looking at, but yes. So here's why. Here's probably the most typical um, difference that's the most extreme. So I'm a very linear thinker. Um, in a lot of ways, in a lot of ways I am creative, and in a lot of ways I'm very uncreative. Um, I like to write. My writing is creative, um, but my creativity involves taking things I already have and sort of manipulating them in a way that you know comes up with something new and cute and interesting. Um, the ADHD brain thinks very far out of the box and comes up with things that I would never have thought of in like a million years. Um, and the truth is, on the in the rabbi side of my profession and the teacher side of my profession, sometimes we're um, interpreting these difficult texts, and there's an element of creativity in coming up with solutions to understand how things work. Why things seem to be contradictory but are not. Um, and I'm usually working with the same ideas I've heard before and trying to tease them this way or that way to try to see if I can come up with something. The ADHD brain will come up with these wildly creative ideas, and sometimes I'm like, whoa, that's brilliant, and sometimes I'm like, whoa, that's so crazy. Um, and when I think something is like too far afield, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm looking at, but I need to communicate with this guy and tell him this is just way too far afield. This is not a thing. And um, the it often comes together. That creativity often comes together with an enthusiasm that you don't want to pour cold water on. If somebody's loving learning, you want them to continue to love learning, and you want them to continue to use their creativity. So I have to try to strike that balance of, okay, this suggestion is a little out there, um, but don't, but keep them coming.
Right.
So our brains are working very differently, but thankfully, because of my training, I know what I'm looking at.
Okay. I bet that helps being a teacher as well, as opposed to because I can imagine teachers who don't quite understand it and they're like, "Can I don't know what to do with this kid. Can this child just sit down?" But for you, I can. It gives you a level of empathy that probably makes everything better for yourself as well as the child.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. Very early on, shortly after I trained, actually, one of the things I learned in training, and I don't even know why it stood out so much to me, but what I learned was sometimes you could be talking to someone with ADHD and they don't hear you. It actually reminds me of a great joke, which goes, I hate when my wife begins conversations with, "Why aren't you listening to me?" So I realized sometimes I'm talking in class, or you're like telling the guys get their notebooks, get their something, and they have no idea that that just happened.
Yep.
So I told the guys once, get their books from their lockers, and I'm looking around and everybody's getting them. And one guy, he's standing in a corner with like no idea that anything just happened. And I'm realizing what just went on. He doesn't know that I told the guys to get their notebooks. So I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, we're going to get our notebooks." And like I had his eye contact, I had his attention. He said, "Oh, sure, no problem." He went and got his notebook. I did this for a whole year with this kid, and he has no idea to this very day. So that could have been such a stupidly explosive, interaction, and instead it's no big deal.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that. That happens to me sometimes too. I there are these moments where you start a conversation with someone and you ask them, "Nice to meet you. What's your name? Or what's your name? Give me your story." And as soon as they start talking, it's like the Men in Black flash thing
The flashy
erases your
thing.
mind, and you come back and they're talking, and you're like, "Oh my god, I don't know what this person's. I don't know what they've been saying for the past 2 minutes now." Is there a word for that?
Yes, so often this has to do with working memory, meaning this. Um, the ADHD brain struggles to retrieve information in the moment as you need it. So what can happen is if you're trying to think what you're saying next, what you want to say next, what your follow-up question is, your brain is in your follow-up question. And if you lose, um, if you're afraid to lose that follow-up question, so you're holding on to that thing for dear life to the exclusion of whatever the person you're talking to is
Exactly.
saying. Actually, I'm on some chats with teachers, educators, whatever, and somebody posted that in his class, there's a he was a younger kids, and there's a kid who's going to start taking medication. He's very bright. He loves to learn, but he blurts out questions out of turn and it throws off the whole rhythm of the class. Anyone have any suggestions? So I wrote to him, here's what's going on. He has his question. He doesn't want to lose it. He's so excited about it. So he blurts it out because he's afraid if he waits his turn, he's gone. So if you get him a little marker board where he can write down his question right away, he's not going to forget it. If he's excited, he can hold it up, but he's not going to disturb the class because he's not making any noise. Then you're good to go. And he emailed me back that so far so good.
Okay. That reminds me of another keyword. I think you were the one who told me about it, but is erratic attention versus sustained attention. Can you walk me through that?
Oh, sure. So the sustained attention will happen when something is interesting. Like that, then you'll get the hyperfocus. That's what sustained attention is. Erratic attention will be jumping in and out, presumably when you're fighting with your own attention span. Meaning, if the thing you're listening to is not interesting, but you think it's important, so you're going to try. So sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you won't. You'll have that sort of battle. That could be what is meant by erratic attention. Otherwise, it could just be the fact that the ADHD brain can pay attention sometimes and has a difficult time other times. Either of those could be described as erratic attention.
Okay, I got it. And then I'm guessing sustained would probably be that hyper focus mode,
Yeah.
that the infamous hyper focus, the elusive, elusively infamous to say. I've heard. I was talking to another coach, and they were saying that they were talking about renaming it. One, I heard that they cut the AD, like it used to be ADD versus ADHD, and now it's just all ADHD. And another thing they told me was actually they might consider renaming it because it is not attention deficit is considered a lack of attention, but it is not a lack of attention. I think you said this in the beginning. Has that happened yet, or has it been renamed? Is that a thing?
So people are pushing it, especially because there are those who don't like the name disorder. Take it or leave it. But I like. I feel like the people who have it should be the ones to weigh in on that, not me. Um, but as far as the naming, so I think a big challenge is that there are laws um, that allow people with ADHD certain accommodations in certain places, like taking the SATs and whatever. So written into the law is the term ADHD. So they're going to have all those written, laws changed. Have the terminology changed, and that seems would be a um, probably a bureaucratic nightmare. So I think people would like to work on it, but I think that's a huge hurdle.
Right, I see. Yeah, all the websites are gonna have to update their their landing pages and everything. That kind of makes sense. And I guess the name is just a name. I mean, the fact remains that the condition is still the same.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand where people feel like they don't like the word disorder associated with themselves. I can sympathize with that. Um, I feel like as a guy who doesn't have it, I'm gonna mind my own business.
Like, okay, you guys can take that vote. That is not my vote. How much damage can the wrong approach from a parent or teacher do to a kid that has ADHD? Like, what could be the long term effects on that, and how would you even handle it? If you don't know what to do. That was three questions in one, but
Okay, for really good ones. Um, Unfortunately, it can be really bad. Here's why. Um, Number one, when people have expectations of a kid that they can't live up to, that can cause a lot of emotional damage. So the kid
yeah.
is constantly being yelled at, um, often devolves into, um, I don't want to use the word abuse, it's a strong word, but getting a lot of negative feedback, a lot of negativity, on the way the kid feels, miserable about themselves,
Mhm.
and that can grow and fester over years and years. Um, the ADHD brain also is more likely to land in addiction, and uh, so that's one piece of it, the damage. The other piece is not being able to learn how to do the things that they need to be able to do. So they're trying to get through school in a way that they don't have the skills to get through school. So they're not going to. I mean, they can end up flunking their way through and making it through, but they're not going to get anything out of the experience. Um, they're not going to get the life skills they need the way they need them.
Mhm.
So they can really flounder. They can flounder through school. They can drop out of school. They can struggle um, to keep a job. They can struggle to stay in a relationship. Um, all those things can happen. Dr. Barkley, Russell Barkley, came out with a paper some years ago um, about how unaddressed ADHD can severely shorten life expectancy between
Mm.
risky behaviors, addictions, etc. Um, all those can lead to some really dangerous behaviors. So unaddressed ADHD can be very scary.
I see. Yeah, that's um I've talked to people who weren't diagnosed until they were well into their adulthood, like almost half of their life. And they're like, all my life I thought I was, not smart. And then they took an IQ test, and it turns out they were really smart, but everyone else was telling them they were dumb. And I can't imagine, what that would be like if they had learned that they were like borderline genius when they were younger. What that could have done to the trajectory of their lives.
Yeah, exactly. In my field, I hear a lot about people getting their diagnosis when they bring their kid in to get diagnosed. Somebody,
Yep.
yeah, somebody says like, "Hey, your kid's having a hard time with school, this, that, the other." So they bring him in, and the therapist will be like, will just be describing the symptoms and behaviors, and the parents like, "Isn't that normal? I do that." And then they're like, "Well, actually, about that, you know,
No, it's not. Neither one of you guys are
what?"
are quite normal. So you're a rabbi, an educator, and a coach. Um, how do these three things relate? Is there ever an intersection between them?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, so the skills as a coach definitely helped me in the classroom. The skills as a teacher definitely helped me as a coach. The communication skills.
Hmm.
Um, and on the rabbi side of things, yes, meaning understanding people's brains, people's needs, people's differences, um, can help relating to people, um, just in human interactions, and in the teaching and speaking side of things, understanding who I'm talking to and how they need to hear things presented, in a way that's gonna, resonate with them or speak to them, in the way that's best for them. Um, yes, I think everything really feeds off each other in a good way, I hope.
Okay. You know, when I talked to you and you told me that you were ADHD coach, but you didn't have ADHD, that kind of made me go back and think because before I have done ADHD coaching myself before, and I was looking for someone that had ADHD. And I never thought that it could be helpful until I met you of having someone who doesn't have ADHD because it could give you an insight on just the opposite of what you said, where the parent said, "Isn't that normal?" And so like, and then they realized, oh, that's not actually normal. So I realized it actually could be beneficial having somebody who's like not ADHD, where you can see like actually that's not normal, or it shows you the gap. But has anyone? Have you ever had a client kind of give you like a light bulb moment where you're just like, oh, that's or give you some sort of insight? Has that ever happened?
That's a great question. Um, the answer is for sure yes. I don't know if I can retrieve it in the moment. Let's try to think. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it now. But
If
yes, I
not,
definitely have
they
had it.
will.
Yeah,
If not, the audience will have to come back for episode 2 to get that insight.
for
So,
sure.
oh, go ahead.
I would add that with my clients, because a lot of them think so creatively. So what will often happen is they'll describe what they're struggling with to me. I'll describe why it's difficult for them, and give them like an outline of what a general strategy would be. And then with their creativity, they'll come up with an application that I never would have thought of. And that's very cool when that happens.
I can see that. What is your what would be your top 3 principles to life? And it doesn't have to be 3. It could be 1. It could be even be 10. But just your general principles for being successful in life.
Right. Um, my number one, I think, knowledge is power. We live in a world with a lot of uh, sketchy information, which is very unhelpful in a lot of ways. So the more knowledge in a discerning way, knowledge that's real and honest. Um, so I would say that's probably, if I could put as much of that out there as possible, knowledge coming from a discerning and thoughtful place, that's probably my number one. Um, I think number two is humility, being able to hear other people out, being able to appreciate, um, understand other people, um, being able to hear out the possibility of being wrong or mistaken. I think I'd love to put more of that out there too. Um, and then as a religious person, just the idea that um, you know objective values. We humans um, always have biases. So what I've been taught as a religious, God-fearing person is they or try to be um, is values from beyond us, um, which are really, to me, I see them as the way to stay grounded, and the way to keep us honest. So I think those would be my big three: knowledge, humility, and objective values.
Objective values. Okay. I like it. I think that the humility one, that's very important as well, which I can only imagine that you have to have in your profession dealing with teaching other humans in general, regardless of their age.
Yes.
um, I can imagine there's a lot of humility there. But thank you for coming on this podcast. I've enjoyed this conversation. We're out of time now. I have like a lot of other questions that I wanted to ask you. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 for this. But if anyone wants to connect with you, where can they find you? How do they get in touch with you, Samuel?
Oh, great. Thanks. So they can either email me at rsreich, R-E-I-C-H, ADHDcoach at gmail.com. They can find me on my website, um, rsreich, R-E-I-C-H, ADHDcoach.com. Um, those are the two best places to get me, or they can text or call 646-262-8257. If they leave a message, I'll call back. Um, and if they want to hear more, they can find me at my podcast, the ADHD Heroes podcast, or on LinkedIn. They can find me there too.
All right. So there's many ways they can definitely get in touch with you. I think you're the first guest who gave a phone number. That's pretty cool.
Oh, great.
Um, but no, this was a great conversation. As always, Samuel. And until the next episode, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you later.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. Really enjoyed.
The little emojis.
I like these ones.
I'm gonna stop this now.